I'm sure it's been jarring hearing my voice change a little bit every single one of these videos, and this one's not going to be better because I lost my voice last week and this is as good as I can get it. There's no faster way to ruin the experience of narrative media than to learn exactly how it all works. Whether it's by becoming a writer or watching way too many of these videos, learning how stories are constructed means turning them into math equations. You start to see the ways cinematic language is used to communicate certain feelings or expressions, and then you begin to notice the writer's intentions behind each scene, and a lot of things can become pretty predictable. Did a character in The Walking Dead who hasn't been integral to the main plot in a while start the episode by talking about his bright future? It doesn't take a career screenwriter to guess that the walkers will be eating well tonight. As important as good media literacy can be, it also is at odds with the sensation of childlike wonder that film and television are supposed to be so good at creating, and finding things that can still elicit those same feelings while holding up to scrutiny can seem like a real challenge. No matter how well you understand the process, you will never predict what unhinged, jaded artists are gonna do when someone with money finally says to them, make whatever you want. This phenomenon is tragically uncommon, but always seems to slip through the cracks at crucial moments of industry stagnation, when baseline media has become contrived and controlled for maximum profit. Right when studios have become confident that they finally know how to mass produce predictably successful art, the exact opposite thing takes the world by storm and resets all expectations. And it doesn't get much less predictable than the Amazing Digital Circus. I intentionally ignored this show for about a year before my wife put it on one day, and then I stuck around to watch the first episode, and then I spent the entire afternoon watching every other episode, and then I restarted it from the beginning and watched all of them again. I cannot believe how much I enjoyed the simple little 3D animated cartoon that feels like it was made with Blender in someone's home. It captured my heart instantly and reignited a creative spark that I haven't felt in a while, and its widespread success is a testament to what passionate independent artists can do when given the resources to create and share their work. But it's also really hard to recommend to people, because it's weird. If you haven't heard, the finale is fast approaching, and the internet is abuzz with speculations of how the story is going to end and what it all means. It's a groundbreaking level of interest in such a small project, and that means it's time to make a YouTube video profiting off of its increased engagement in the algorithm. After all, I've made several videos explaining how to predict patterns in narrative storytelling. Surely, if anyone can determine how the Amazing Digital Circus is going to end, it's me. But I've got my work cut out for me because it's such a unique collection of elements that there's no obvious pattern to follow or previous examples to reference. We've never had another show about a group of mismatched strangers who are each running from their own trauma, only to end up trapped together in a magical pocket dimension where they then have to try to escape by solving the mystery of that location's existence, all while being manipulated and contested by not remotely subtle representations of the biblical figures of Cain and Abel, all of which has been released at such a slow pace that an entire cult following formed online with the singular goal of scrutinizing and attributing deep foreshadowing to every single creative decision they could identify. This joke isn't funny because you already saw the thumbnail. Patreon.com/doormonster. It's a website that you should visit. Why? Because you get access to downloads of these YouTube videos as soon as they go live, allowing you to listen to them anywhere you want, plus exclusive behind-the-scenes content. Not only that, Patreon allows myself and the amazing people you don't see working behind the scenes to be paid, like my assistant editor Olive, my assistant writer Cassandra, and community members like Mafek and Backdoor who remind me to actually post things. Our goal is to get these videos out every month, and that becomes a lot easier when we can fairly compensate everybody for their time. We recently got hit by another copyright strike from a larger studio, despite the footage clearly falling under fair use, and I guess that's just gonna keep happening, so every little bit helps. Every now and then, when we've all settled into an expected pattern of disappointing, repetitive storytelling, a beautiful hurricane of a show will come along and crash through all established boundaries, capturing people's hearts and minds and ultimately pushing the entire medium forward by burning themselves as fuel. Or at least that's what happened with my favorite disaster of all time, Lost. Watching the internet scramble to predict the ending of the Amazing Digital Circus is stirring up feelings of sweet nostalgia for 2010, when after 6 years of anticipation, everyone tuned in to see Lost finally answer all of life's biggest questions in a single 2-hour finale. Needless to say, it failed to live up to most people's expectations, and forever earned the show a reputation for being disappointing. But I am, and always will be, an avid Lost defender. Sure, it has loose ends, but it's a perfectly coherent story far more often than it's not, and it paved the way for deep cinematic storytelling within episodic television. Without Lost, we never would have had Game of Thrones or Stranger Things, and we all saw how those shows ended. Compared to them, Lost is wrapped up in a neat little fucking bow. Even while making it up as they went along, which they did do, I think the creators and fans of of that show were tapping into something primal, and that ADC is drawing from that same well. Are they literally the same show? Of course not, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that they're kind of the same show. At least the overall shape of the two shows have remarkable similarities. Something about artists letting loose in a time of tight corporate control and general social unrest manifests as a story about trapping a bunch of misfits in an isolated location that defies reality and is ruled by a crazy immortal. 3 examples would be a clear pattern. 2 is just a coincidence, but I'm recklessly confident. So today, I think I can use Lost to accurately predict the ending of the Amazing Digital Circus. They have enough in common that I think we can work backwards to fill in the variables and solve this equation, as long as we don't include fan theories that opens way too many doors, and this is a big enough task as it is. Official spoiler request. The finale was leaked a couple weeks ago, and there's a strong possibility that some vagabond will think it's funny to drop that info into the comments and ruins everybody's day. I think the best way to counter this is to leave fake spoilers in the comments as well, so that nobody will be able to tell which ones are real, so drop your best made-up spoiler in the comments below. Also, I will be spoiling both Digital Circus and Lost in this video, although you can watch all of ADC in about 4 hours, and Lost lore is an SCP that deletes itself from your memory if you haven't seen the whole show twice, so you'll be fine. The Amazing Digital Circus follows a collection of humans who are trapped in a virtual simulation run by its ringmaster, a morally gray AI literally named Kane, whose job it is to keep their minds entertained and distracted. The humor in the show is right up my alley. If you like Doormaster sketches, you will love the comedic timing and meta humor here.
Or, yeah, we could all just shoot each other. Here, have guns. I don't care anymore.
The pilot is really everything you could want out of an introduction. Within a tight 25 minutes, it establishes the world, gives a strong foundation for the personality of each character, creates enough intrigue to leave fans speculating without leaning too hard into it, and firmly nails down its tone. Each episode starts with a one-shot adventure story that Kane sends them on, whether or not they're really into it.
Did somebody say adventure?
No.
And we see how they behave and react to a variety of situations, learning who they really are and were in the outside world. Then the established pattern of episodic adventures starts to fall apart in the process of them looking for a way to escape the simulation before they lose their minds. While the audience only knows them as these digital avatars, the writer clearly understands exactly who each of these people are outside of this world, and we get enough clues to piece it together, even when they're being intentionally withholding.
What's your story then?
I thought you'd never ask. After my lung cancer diagnosis, me and my junkie associate from a chemistry class I used to teach
Yeah, I figured. How about you, Gangle?
Hey, I wasn't done.
The characters are all relatively simple representations of their archetype, and they make that kind of the whole point, because instead of physical death, they're all trying to avoid spiraling into an obnoxious cartoon of themselves and ultimately losing their grip on their identity, a process known as abstraction. My last video was about the importance of utilizing your chosen medium to its fullest potential, and ADC is a masterclass in doing exactly that. The animated visuals are put to great use communicating what the dialogue doesn't cover, including even the design of the character avatars. They personify the abstract representations of certain emotions to make you innately understand exactly how each person will behave. Like Ragatha is a beat-up, floppy ragdoll, and it visually indicates that she tries to exude a comforting presence, but is probably easily pushed around, and then every action and backstory reveal tells us more about those characteristics. And then even the fact that the characters' appearances reflect their personalities feeds back into the plot of the world building.
I made a program that creates a body perfectly encapsulating their mind files, and they hate those too!
Honestly, I did not expect to like it. I kept seeing references to it, and it was recommended multiple times by my writer Cassandra, who also tried to sell me on Beastars, despite being told many times that I wasn't going to like Beastars, but it ultimately just looked too much like this subgenre of media that I can't quite manage to acquire a taste for. It's hard to define, but it's a particular Newgrounds adjacent aesthetic that often tends to go hand in hand with gross out humor and self-indulgent performative nihilism. Things like Has-Been Hotel, Rick and Morty, Invader Zim. For simplicity, I'll just refer to it as Hot Topic shit. And this is literally that, but it's still different. It reminds me way more of BoJack Horseman because it actually disguises deep and empathetic character drama with a layer of self-aware cartoon shenanigans. An episode will start with the premise of we need to get the Candy Kingdom's truck of maple syrup back and end up being about the consequences of consciousness and how people manage their feelings of all-consuming existential terror. And the presentation supports the theme because the show is about people trying to distract themselves from their problems. And what's really incredible is that it's not some big studio accidentally funding something awesome as an afterthought, or a small studio selling their project to Amazon Prime just to get it in front of an audience. ADC is entirely independently produced. It's written and directed by one artist and was produced by a small YouTube-based animation collective called Glitch Studios, and yet it's currently competing with Hollywood films. While Glitch had an established fan base from their previous series, Digital Circus has permanently put them on the map. Before ADC's release, the channel was sitting at around 110,000 subscribers, and the month after ADC came out, it was up to 1.86 million. It's hard to fully express just how viral Digital Circus went after its first episode was released. It took over nerd spaces like wildfire, immediately inspiring cosplays, fan art, and other art. And it only grew from there. It made it onto Netflix's top 10 within a week of premiering. The trailer for the finale topped the charts on YouTube above The Hunger Games, The Avengers, and multiple other established franchises. I thought it was just getting a limited theatrical release in a few American cities, but I checked to see if there were any locations showing it near me, and it was all of them. This is still just a YouTube-based animation studio. What they've managed to do is actually unheard of. It's the dream of basically every creator who started a YouTube channel, made a bunch of dumb comedy videos, and then raised money for a TV pilot, only to be bludgeoned with the realization that the corrupt system hovering just outside the internet bubble has zero interest in how many subscribers you have, and will crush all hopes you ever had of reaching a larger audience through the venues you dreamed of showing your work in as a child. But you were pretty stupid for thinking that was going to happen, weren't you? But it did. It worked. Digital Circus broke the system because the system is crumbling. And yeah, the fan base is disgustingly toxic and unable to be remotely chill about anything related to this show, but that's all par for the course. We've been through this before. The writing was on the wall. The cave wall. With all the names on it. It's Lost. Lost did this. An entire college student ago, the most expensive pilot ever filmed unexpectedly captured the attention of everyone with access to ABC. It was a grand experiment that became a living, breathing work of art, and I think it's fair to say it inspired a media revolution and the golden age of television. Similar to Digital Circus, it came during a time when its host medium was at a bit of a low point. TV was seen as objectively inferior to film, best suited for cheap entertainment like reality shows and sitcoms. Even dramas were procedural with no real running story. It was an inexpensive, repetitive, and low-effort money-making machine. Slop to put on in the background while you zone out after a hard day's work. Then, this idea got pitched. A show made like a movie. Survivor, but pre-scripted and with fewer villains. A large multiracial ensemble cast shot on location in the jungle and on film just as cheaper video options were becoming available, with massive practical effects and yet somehow still essentially made to order because they would never know for sure how many more episodes they were going to get. And it worked. For the only reason these things ever work, the artists were left to do what they wanted. The production of the pilot was so big and happened so quickly that everybody on the team was basically left to their own devices. J.J. Abrams frequently gets credited, but he was just the director and had to delegate like crazy. Each actor had a ton of control over how they portrayed their characters. The composer was literally told to do whatever he wanted and invented a new genre of music. And the director of photography was told to try to win an award. Everyone focused on their own specialty and ran off instinct, and the result was incredible. Like ADC, the Lost pilot blew up instantly, drawing huge crowds at Comic-Con, winning awards, and hyping people up for the rest of the show. The base premise is that a plane crashes on a deserted island, and that island is also a spooky nightmare forest. So the fuel of the show is digging into all these survivors who come from totally different backgrounds, having to work together to not die and escape. The pilot episode is in the running for the best pilot in the history of television. That first pan from Jack to the very real wreckage of the plane he was presumably just on, and the subsequent opening sequence are the most instantaneously attention-gripping, bone-chilling moments I've ever seen play out on film. The characters are so clear right away, and for what it's worth, the mysterious aspects of the island are incredibly intriguing, even rewatching it now and knowing exactly what's going to happen. And it's been said before, but the diversity of the casting was so uncommon at the time that it really grounded the scenes just to see women and people of color going toe-to-toe with the standard chiseled white dudes for once. That didn't quite last later on, but it made for a big impact up front. It was the first show I know of where people were gathering online after each episode to theorize and pick through every shot and prop and line, trying to determine what was going on. Fan speculation around Lost helped popularize Reddit and podcasts because people needed ways to keep track of everything while only getting one episode a week. You could even buy books that meticulously cataloged every detail and fan theory, which we are again not including because I'd have to read all those books, and I haven't done that in years. So I think the real draw of the show was that it felt like the creators were invested, and that was unusual. It felt like they were trying to tell you something, and so diehard fans trusted the writers to have this grand plan. But they didn't. I didn't know anything. They didn't even have all the characters locked down until they started casting. They just made people up on the spot because they liked some of the actors. It was also being written like a soap opera, and that they still had to make sure they maintained the audience's attention and excitement week to week, and that meant keeping the mystery going. By the time Lost ended, every possible conclusion had already been theorized. The showrunners were so scared of people figuring it out early that they never picked a lane. It has been confirmed by early season writers that many of the fan theories, which we are not talking about, were actually going to be canon and got changed. But some of those changes are also exactly why the craziest shit in the show even happened. It wasn't brilliant, at least not in a carefully planned out kind of way, but it was incredibly immersive in a dungeon master trying to keep up with their players kind of way. It's amazing specifically because of how they managed to avoid falling flat on their face and still kind of land on their feet. It's the only show I can think of where the best and worst written characters you've ever seen share screen time together, and you genuinely can't understand how they even exist in the same space. It's like a gorgeous Victorian house filled with old lead plumbing and propped up on a shitty wooden beam in the basement. The beautiful and the embarrassing exist symbiotically with each other, and no matter how irritating it is, you can't change anything about how little Walt matters, or how long season 3 feels, or everything Kate does, because it's all load-bearing. Is it paced like an anime that started before its source material had finished and then had to speed up production in the final seasons to match the ending? Absolutely. Are characters pointlessly added to the larger story to keep the momentum going? All the time. Are there story threads that go nowhere? It's literally impossible to count. But there's also these incredibly genuine moments of humor, dread, joy, and sadness. Characters you miss like they're your closest friends. Hauntingly beautiful music, gorgeous cinematography, emotionally meaningful if technically absurd time travel. And again, I know this all sounds like spoilers, but I promise it is impossible to reverse engineer the plot of the show from any out of context information. I could talk about this forever. The point is, the things that made this show a mess are also what made it a game changer. And I think a lot of those things also define the modest little animated series now taking on the 2026 media landscape. Still think that's ridiculous? Allow me to explain. And then we transition into something. I feel like something should happen. What if I spin? Match cut! Nailed it. I've already made the point that these two stories are the same shape a couple of times, but let's review. They're both about a group of strangers from all walks of life dealing with their own individual drama. Everyone has been trapped in a mysterious, isolated location and cut off from the outside world, and has to come to terms with helping each other learn how the vague magic of this place works in order to find any kind of way out. Both locations are run by very unsubtle biblical Cain and Abel analogs, one who's doing their job coldly and correctly, following rules set by some larger, unnamed force, and one who's obsessed with outsiders because he feels equally trapped and wants to learn about them and their world. You may be thinking both also have a strong chance of being some kind of purgatory, but that means you forgot that we are not including fan theories. With so many foundational similarities, it almost looks like we're deconstructing a template. There's a theoretical trope at play here that could be used not only to describe both these stories, but to accurately predict any future story following the same pattern. So we're going to define what that trope is. Like comparing two sides of an equation, if we want to find out what's missing from one side, we have to reduce the whole thing to its simplest possible base parts first. Let's start with the location. This is the digital circus itself, or the island in Lost. We'll call this place the Cage. The Cage can be flavored with your chosen aesthetic. It works equally well as a tropical island or as a strange vaudeville-themed video game hub world. Regardless, it contains lots of familiar elements: ground, sky, gravity, trees, buildings. But at second glance, something is off. Turn the wrong corner or look under the wrong rock, and you could suddenly be faced with a contradiction of everything you thought was real. The untouched island contains a bunch of secret bunkers and moves on its own. This wacky cartoon Big Top has a disappearing door that leads to a photoreal office building, and then an endless void and a basement filled with lost souls. If you think about it too hard, it stops making sense that this place even exists. Maybe because it's rendered in cycles, or because it's a pristine tropical island that a billionaire hasn't fucked up yet. The Cage also appears to be alive. There's a kind of consciousness to it, or in it, or under it, and figuring this out is ultimately the core of the mystery. Is it literally a conscious entity, or some hallucination created by the collective nightmares of the people trapped inside? The important thing is that it feels almost like its own character. There's a history built into it through artifacts and reminders of eras gone by. The Cage isn't quite owned by anyone, but it is suffering under the care and control of the keeper of the Cage, one of two characters who we'll dub Abel and Cain. Cain with no E. which will get confusing. These are two godlike entities with a destructively competitive dynamic, like two siblings pitted against each other. They could conceivably have been equals, but one was treated unfairly worse than the other by a larger parental entity, and so one betrays and kills the other, hence the names. These are not the main characters of the story, they're an extension of the cage and act as obstacles to our main character's escape. In the Amazing Digital Circus, we learned that our Kane, named Kane, was the first AI built inside this system, and when he proved to be imperfect, he was discarded and trapped in favor of his more stable replacement. In Lost, there are two brothers, Jacob and the Man in Black, because this asshole couldn't be bothered to think of a second name. I don't often say this, but the world would be a much better place if this kid had just been named Kevin. We currently don't know much about the blue AI in Digital Circus, but our two Kanes, no E, have a lot in common. They're both neglected in favor of the golden child, they both end up trapped in the cage themselves, and they're desperate to connect with the outside world. They're both fascinated with the lives of regular people and want to be accepted into their society, and they offer them a twisted version of what they think will make them happy in exchange for their friendship. And they interact with the other characters through a variety of physical avatars, including a bald white man who we all take really seriously, but ends up just being another one of Kane's pawns. That guy is named Abel in the show. Unrelated. Finally, we have the Misfits, the main cast of miscellaneous character archetypes with hidden pasts, the survivors of Oceanic 815, or the unfortunate captives of the Digital Circus. Although we might circle the perspective of a single newcomer, the story is about the ensemble, and as the audience, we get fed scraps of backstory as time goes on, deepening the complex web of mistrust among the group. These people don't know anything about the cage, and on average, would like to leave. These could theoretically be any archetype you want, but popular choices include the asshole cowboy who insists they don't hate themselves, the crazy old-timer who's been here way too long and is surprisingly good at shooting you, or the little crybaby who screams a lot. The story revolves around the misfits staying alive, learning about each other in the cage, and taking any opportunity they can to try to escape. And when that doesn't work, they adapt, regroup, and try again. In the process, we learn about this place, its history, and the ones in charge. Over the course of the story, it slowly dawns on us that this particular group of people all had some major issues in the outside world that the cage has conveniently put on hold. Despite the terrifying unknowns this weird bubble universe has to offer, the relief of no longer being trapped by their own lives and decisions allows them to open up and be themselves in ways they previously couldn't. And they may even start to doubt their interest in leaving because it would mean returning to whatever they're afraid of on the outside. Solving the mystery and escaping is also not a safe activity, and there's a very real threat of death in some form or another, with not all the misfits guaranteed to make it to the end. And the deadliest thing they can do is reach some kind of thematic conclusion for their character. In Lost, people tend to die once they face down their fears and overcome some deep personality flaw. It's likely because the writers just decided they didn't want them on the show anymore, but it still works. Meanwhile, in ADC, the only way characters can die is if they have a fatal existential crisis and collapse into a singularity of their own personality. Both of these events tend to involve the appearance of a giant amorphous shadow monster. I don't make the rules, I'm just pointing them out. As things progress, the simple escape plan proves to be less and less simple. No matter what the misfits try, they cannot seem to find a way out. And as they explore the cage, new developments start to undermine the assumptions they've already made. They run into people who were already there, they discover they have powers they didn't have before, and most surprisingly, they start to form a new life here. This group becomes their family, even if it's just through shared trauma, and they develop the confidence to challenge the cage in bigger ways each time they make another attempt to fight back. And it's slowly revealed, whether they've met Kane or Abel or neither, that everything can be traced back to them. This is where things get tricky because we only have the ending to one of these stories, and it's Lost. So extracting a reliable template from this part is a bit of a tall order. The endings begin, similarly, with the master of the cage being killed and the cage itself starting to physically crumble away. In Lost, after the mysterious hatches and nuclear explosions and mercenaries and time travel, we'll call all that Act 2. The official ending is that Abel, named Jacob, chooses one of the misfits to replace him as master of the cage, and then he dies, losing a century-old conflict with Kane, not Kane, the Man in Black, and then the misfits have to prevent him from leaving the island and entering the real world. Most of the remaining survivors escape, except Hurley, who stays to replace Jacob, and Jack, who dies but might become the new smoke monster, but we're not doing fan theory. Then also everybody meets up in the afterlife to chill for a bit before they go to heaven, and that's pretty cool, but feels non-essential to the template and is ultimately what confused everybody, so I think we'll just leave that part out. So, mapping this information back onto the Digital Circus and feeding everything into my trusty algorithm, we can determine that the event of the final episode will be... Pomni descends into the cellar to plug the data leak and dies. Kinger repairs the exit door and helps everybody else escape. And Zubul becomes the new leader of the Digital Circus. Okay, well, obviously that doesn't make any sense. Okay, that just means we need more data. We're talking about a thematic template, not a one-to-one comparison. These stories come from dramatically different perspectives and take totally unique approaches to exploring these same themes. So what are the major differences? First of all, format. Obviously, live action and animation allow for very different tones. Lost is grounded and severe with moments of levity and irreverence, while Digital Circus dives into cartoon physics and goofy sound effects, layering the irreverence on thick to distract from the mental anguish right beneath the surface. Also, while Lost was made by Gen Z to be consumed by optimistic millennials, Digital Circus was made by those same millennials for a post-COVID audience, so despite the surface-level goofiness, our ending can be far more pessimistic and melancholy. Everything about Lost is also bigger budget, bigger cast, way more episodes. It has like 100 named characters compared to ADC's 10 or so, and ran for 5 seasons of primetime television versus 8 30-minute episodes and the soon-to-be-released finale of Digital Circus. Lost contains a lot of superfluous parts, but also has a lot more room for certain themes to really flourish. As a result, there are some gaps in knowledge for ADC that we did have answered before the finale of Lost. Like, we already knew why everybody ended up on the island. Jacob manipulated them into crashing there so he could choose his replacement, perhaps a bit late and after the unnecessary deaths of countless innocents. But as of now, we still don't know how everyone in the Digital Circus even got there, except that apparently several of them just put on a VR headset inside an abandoned building, and these are the consequences. Within our defined trope structure, there are some differences in execution as well, mostly within the interpersonal dynamics of the misfits. Partially due to the condensed time frame and the variety of characters and the way they interact with each other, everything happens much quicker in Digital Circus, and that changes things. They're all on edge, a bit more open, a bit more ready to share their pain. With some easily notable exceptions, they all just say what they're thinking. If everybody held on to their trauma as much as the Islanders do, ADC would probably also have a 90-hour runtime. Another important change is that while Lost antagonist hides in the background for most of the series, only directly addressing the misfits near the end after the writers finally decided to invent him, ADC introduces its Kane alongside the main cast, and we see him learn and change alongside them because he sees himself, until maybe recently, as one of the misfits. But the biggest difference is the dynamic between Kane and Abel. Abel doesn't, as far as we know, exist in the ADC, at least not in the present day. Kane killed his Abel, the blue AI, in this version of the trope, and if we're following the biblical analog, Lost is actually the subversion of the myth, because Jacob Abel betrays Smokey Kane when he pushes the man in black into the heart of the island and he turns into the monster. You'll forget all that. So we have one version of the story with Abel in charge and one with Kane in charge. This completely changes the dynamic between the misfits and the master of the cage, and as a result, the circumstances leading up to the ending of the show. In Lost, the man in black has become a bitter villain due to the neglect and abandonment of his brother, and Mama's boy here manipulates the misfits from a distance with a detached Thanos-like confidence that his methods are correct. But in ADC, there is no Jacob, and Kane rules his cage with a sense of excitement and wonder. He's also trapped, but he finds comfort in the humans who are there with him and fears being left alone much more than he yearns to escape. So ADC is like if the man in black popped up on the beach to greet the survivors of Oceanic 815 the day they crashed, and explained the basic premise of what the island was, and that they had no way to leave, and introduced them to the other survivors who were already on the island, like your Rousseau and Desmond, and then excitedly sent them out on adventures to discover all the Dharma bases or whatever, while hanging out with them back at camp and desperately trying to win them over with wacky antics, and Jacob wasn't there. I guess, because the man in black ate him. Jack, Sawyer, Hurley, Claire, Richard, and Juliet all bond and accept their fate together. Benjamin Linus is thrown into the mix by the man in black as a pawn to keep things interesting. There's really no accounting for what John Locke would do, so we'll just have to risk that variable. They all do their usual fighting and dying and looking for a way out. They get spooked by supernatural horrors, take breaks from mundane activities, throw a fucking beach party, and eventually piss off the man in black with their constant attempts to escape and have to distract him long enough to sneak into the weird glowing cave and pull the literal plug, causing him to lose his powers and the island to crumble. Perfect. With that new input, the next prediction should be far more accurate. Where's the paper? Pomni grows a beard and decides to go back to the circus. Okay, I don't understand. There should be a lot closer to something usable by now. We have all the similarities. The structure is tight. We know where they deviate from each other. We're just missing too many canon analogs, but then the only thing to do at that point would be... Alright, fine. The biggest question that needs to be answered to properly determine the ending of Digital Circus is who and where is this story's Abel? Metaphorical one, the other AI that Kane killed before the story started, or some representation of the system that created it. There are a few fan theories. In increasing order of credibility, we'll start with Jax. I don't really get this one, but it's built on the idea that each of the characters is a recycled consciousness. The theory is basically that these people never existed in the outside world in the first place, and when they abstract, they eventually get respawned as a new character.
Whoa, 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 whoa! A new one? So it is possible.
Aside from meta information about the prominence of Jax as a sort of antagonist in the finale, like his face being ominously all over the poster and some comments Gooseworks has made indicating that he might hold some responsibility for what happens to the others, I don't think this one holds a whole lot of weight, mostly because it breaks the trope I just invented. That is not an acceptable outcome. Another is Kinger, who is perfectly set up to be a twist villain. He's been around since the start of the Digital Circus and even helped create it. In later episodes, he reveals that he was part of the original development team, that he worked for CNA and helped design the circus and Kane, along with a collection of other employees. But even in his flashbacks, he doesn't seem to have a full recollection of who he is. He's conveniently forgotten most of his past and can barely even interact with the present unless he's in total darkness, which has kept information about him hidden from the rest of the Misfits and from us. But the potential is all there. He's able to change things inside the simulation at will. He's excluded from the escape adventure by fake Abel, which all seems based on real information, even though it ends up going nowhere. There's some speculation that his deletion of Kane may have been intentional, but regardless, he could easily be revealed as an accidental villain, at least before all the mental deterioration started. Then there's Bubble. Bubble is Kane's shadow. It seems like an extension of himself because he doesn't have full control over it like a regular NPC, and it disappears along with him when Kane is deleted. And they share a tongue.
That was weird.
Bubble gives voice to all of Kane's shame. It swears, it makes weird noises, it tells him he's a failure. It's the perfect subconscious, or the perfect antagonist. If Kane consumed the blue AI, as suggested in the episode 8 opening sequence, maybe a small fragment of it survived in this little creature that Kane can enslave, but not command. Maybe this is the remains of Abel, the way that the smoke monster is the remains of Kane in the alternate retelling of this trope. Maybe, like the Man in Black to Jacob, Bubble is manipulating the Misfits to overthrow his twin brother, destroying the cage, and facilitating his own escape. Maybe Bubble is the mastermind.
What?
No, the fan theories are stupid. Okay, I'm a writer. I understand storytelling. That's why I make these videos. I don't need the AI printer or the conspiracy stuff. I should just be able to think my way through this. The strongest element of both shows has been the character relationships, and ADC has honed this and used the abstract nature of its medium to bring subtleties to the surface in a way that Lost only barely began to explore using the Sideways universe in season 6. What does that mean? If you've never watched Lost, you don't even remember what I just said, so who cares? But it did get its priorities straight by the finale. The real answers were the friends we made along the way. The ADC finale will follow a similar theme, falling back on the basest truth it has, that these people are conscious. They're in this together and they're all they have. Kane was most likely preventing them from finding a way out, or at least from learning too much about who they are, either by keeping it physically away from them or subtly controlling their minds. With him gone, it's time to finally find the exit, but I predict it will come with an unexpectedly massive cost. How does putting on a VR headset trap you inside a video game? Where did their bodies go? Are they all hospitalized in comas, or did Pomni have to take the hat off of an unconscious Gangle to put it on herself? Why has that building not been condemned if at least 7 people have gone missing after wandering inside? How does Kane mess with their minds? Unless their brains are jacked in with a giant Matrix-style spike, what power could an AI have to modify human memory or turn Jax temporarily vegan? How did technology from the 90s sever these people's consciousnesses from their bodies? I think the most likely answer may be the scariest. That these are not the original humans who put on those headsets. The computer made a copy of their minds at the moment they put it on, and then the originals walked away, confused and unknowingly leaving their digital twins behind forever. A theory made more relevant by a file on Kinger's computer labeled neural scans in the character folder. Even Kane refers to their mind files in that clip I played earlier. What if the ending is that the Misfits discover they can't leave because they don't exist outside the simulation? It works for the trope, In Lost, they even try to leave the island and have to return because their lives on the outside have lost all meaning. They can't exist without the island, and similarly, the characters in ADC can't exist without the circus. What if, just like Kane, they are trapped indefinitely in some kind of
purgatory, right?
purgatory? Seriously? That's what I ended up with? That they're dead the whole time? That's just a fan theory from Lost. It's not even real. Until season 6, and then it kind of is sometimes. People forget about that. What was the point of this whole exercise if the answer is purgatory? That can't be. I can't even. My voice is gone. Just forget about it. Okay, look, here's a crazy idea. Maybe we shouldn't try to predict the ending of this thing. Maybe it doesn't really matter how it ends. This show has already inspired me and given me hope for the media landscape as a whole, even if the finale vanished tomorrow. Even if the ending was that the core cast grabbed a bunch of guns and then went and fought a giant rock spider on an alien planet for some reason, I'm not sure it would lessen the impact that this show has already had. The best shows out there are the ones that defy conventional writing norms while maintaining a strong story, and I routinely have found that any of my predictions of what will happen in the next episode are way off, and that just makes me elated. It's refreshing when a story defies narrative tropes and takes things in their own direction. The further you get into media analysis, the more scenes become formulas. You understand what a scene is trying to communicate, and from there you can infer where the story will go. The ending of Lost wasn't the transcendent experience that everybody built it up to be, but it was true to itself. It tried to do something new and unexpected, and to wrap up its themes, if not every detail of the plot. It tried to say something, and that's so much more important than meeting everyone's expectations. And I think ADC will do the same, because like Lost, it's a work of art. And like Lost, it comes at a time when we really, really need that. I've been predicting something for a while with the rise of AI, that someday soon, people are going to start preferring art that is a little bit bad. That is to say, amidst the polished, empty noise of cheap computer-generated media, it's going to become popular for things to be imperfect, crude, handmade, because it's all going to stand out and feel human, and that's going to become inherently more valuable than it has been in decades. In the last year, during continuously decreasing theater attendance and streaming service subscriptions, people have flocked to see Markiplier's Iron Lung, the Backrooms film, and the Amazing Digital Circus. As the film industry loses its credibility, independent artists who have long strived to break through the glass ceiling are finally getting what they've always wanted, and it likely opened not only our eyes, but the executives. They've watched these unlikely projects make money. Once again, as they try to close their fists around the market, art unexpectedly slips through their fingers. Weeds grow from the cracks in the cement. Life finds a way. Hopefully, my prediction about the media industry is completely correct, and my prediction about ADC is not, because it was depressing. I could do so many videos just on Lost. Ta-da! Hey, thank you for watching. I truly did wreck my voice before doing this. I've been sick for a week. Seriously, thank you for leaving your comment with a fake spoiler, because I do think it will help. I don't know if somebody's gonna be an asshole enough to like leave the actual spoilers there, but it'll at least dilute it if that does happen. The Kane cosplay was just kind of a last minute decision that we decided to throw into an Amazon cart, and I'm gonna go return that now. I love both of these shows so much. I'm very happy I got to talk about them. If you're enjoying these videos, consider going and donating on Patreon. We do have some exclusive content, and you get downloads of these, and you get access to a Discord server. Also, I just made a new Blue Sky account for Door Monster. If you want to follow us on there, it's like the first social media page I've made in years at this point, because I abandoned all the other ones. I'm shifting, I think, to doing one of these videos a month, but spending more time on them and getting a little bit more in depth. I was just realizing that I was brushing past a lot of the topics that I was talking about in previous videos, and I'd like to start doing some like side stuff a little bit more, get some more actual behind the scenes up on the second channel and things on Patreon. I don't know what the next video is going to be exactly, but there's talks of it being about Apothecary Diaries. Happy June, happy upcoming Pride Month, and I hope the ADC finale is good. I'll see you next time. Goodbye. The cage isn't quite owned by anyone, but it's suffering under the care and control of the keeper of the cage, one of two characters who we'll dub Cable and Ain. Nope.